Jodelle. Welcome to the Get Fit with Jodelle podcast. I'm excited today to introduce you to Dr. Darren Schmidt. He's been so generous to join me and talk about some really interesting things that are, I feel like, just coming about based on his work. Like, I haven't heard a lot of what he's going to be talking about from other people other than way back in some old books that I've read. And so Dr. Schmidt, thank you for joining me today. And I just want to give a brief introduction of you. You are a chiropractor, correct? Who's been focusing on 100% clinical nutrition since 1998. And you are the owner of the Nutritional Healing Center of Ann Arbor. And you also do a lot of speaking on health, I understand.
Yes. Yeah, there was a stint for about 8 years where I spoke like weekend seminars to mostly natural healthcare doctors. I did like 75 seminars in those 8 years.
I love that. I read that on your website. It's really neat to find somebody who's educating the educators to really bring to fruition the need for more nutrition and lifestyle practices outside of just prescribing this pill or that supplement or just, cracking their backs or whatever. So yeah, I really appreciate that you're trying to get this knowledge. And I love the knowledge that you've come to seems from kind of an old world mentality. You like to read a lot of older literature, not so much like the new stuff that's coming about, because we really seem to come full circle. We always come back to things like Hippocrates, and then you've mentioned Dr. Royal Lee and things like that. So can you talk about just a few of the people that you've really gained insight from?
Yeah, so Dr. Royal Lee, he would be considered the father of holistic nutrition. And then Dr. Henry Harrower, the father of endocrinology.
Right.
Dr. Otto Warburg, the father of physiology. Mm-hmm. There's the father of holistic psychiatry, Dr. Abram Hoffer. They all kind of talked about, and I don't know if he was use the word discovered, but it's a series of people throughout decades that were trying to fix the mechanism of chronic disease. And actually have a book from 1,300 years ago where they talk about, it's a reprint, of course, but they talk about eating too many beans or legumes and then people getting sick from it, like an acidic type of sickness. Mm-hmm. And it's the same mechanism.
Wow.
So, and there's other people too.
Well, maybe at the end we can talk about some of the books you might recommend that you've delved into that others can really gain this insight from too. But, I found your work because I was really looking into blood. I got really interested in understanding the mechanism of how blood affects all aspects of our body. And I came across your website and your videos and your lectures and things like that. And I really appreciated your knowledge on something that you have coined, or maybe someone else has coined, but you talk about lactic acidosis. And you don't hear much about this other than what I've found that you've written about. So can you tell my listeners, what is lactic acidosis and how does one, develop it?
Okay, so it depends on the decade, like what the definition is. But so basically back in the 1930s, it was dirty blood. And they called, and so the main poison, if you will, is lactate.
Okay.
And then the acidosis part means a condition of having a low pH, to the blood being too acidic. Mm-hmm. Now the blood range for pH is very limited. It's like 7.35 to 7.45, somewhere in there. And you can still be in the normal range, but your blood is a little bit too acidic. Now, basically what it means is dirty blood. Now, it could be acidic or not, or the dirtiness of the blood could be lactate or not. Like, so as the decades have evolved, then researchers and people were saying, well, this person has the symptoms of lactic acidosis, but their lactate level is normal, mm-hmm. or they don't have any acidity in their blood. So basically it's dirty blood. Now, the basic premise, though, is to clean the blood. Right. And that's what all the doctors were trying to do between 1920 and 1960. And they, figured, well, you got to fix the thyroid, you got to fix the liver, you got to fix the parathyroid, you got to fix the adrenal. They're trying to deal with all the organs to fix the blood. But the bigger picture is to feed your muscles. Because when you look at the pounds of organs, certainly the muscles are the biggest organ. Mm-hmm. People say it's the skin or the liver. It's not that. It's the muscles.
Right.
So it comes down to fitness nutrition. So fitness fitness nutrition is human nutrition. And if your blood is dirty and your muscles are sick, there's no way your thyroid has a chance, or your brain, or your adrenals. They don't have a chance if you're not feeding your muscles.
That
So
makes
does that make
sense.
sense?
Yes, absolutely, because the blood is the supply to all of these areas. So everything from the muscles to the organs to the skin, it needs blood. But if the blood is dirty, obviously that's where the trickle-down effect starts, where we see disease, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. And I really like the analogy you used with a fish tank, with an aquarium. Can you talk about lactic acidosis to explain to the listeners based on kind of like a parable?
Right. So imagine a dirty aquarium and the fish are dying, or they have, I use the condition ichthyosis, which is a skin condition of the fish. So you can treat the fish for their condition. But the truth is the water is dirty and the filter is not working. They're not getting enough air in the water. So to fix the situation, you got to fix the water, which would be like the blood in the body. And you got to repair the filter of the aquarium, which would be like the liver and the lymphatic system. So it's that bigger holistic viewpoint instead of just treating the skin of the fish.
It's so true, because like if you think, and I know this is kind of a morbid analogy too, but if someone's cremated, they are left with ash. But where did all the rest of their body go? It's this little jar of ash, but yet they were this large person, and the rest of their body was water or liquid. And just like those liquids, a lot of that liquid is the blood. The blood is a lot of water. And so I like your aquarium analogy for that reason. And I guess in that analogy, the fish would be the cells. So the cells are dying based on the water being dirty, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Well, that's so fascinating. So as far as like how you treat and how you help people with lactic acidosis, like how do you determine that they have that?
Well, I have a survey for people who contact us long distance. So we do phone consultations and video conferencing. And so they fill out the survey. I created the survey. It's like 7 or 8 pages long, and a third of it is about lactic acidosis. So basically there's a number of symptoms that indicate that somebody has it. Mm-hmm. So, but if somebody has a chronic illness, chances are very, very high that they have it. Mm-hmm. So anybody with cancer, heart disease, or diabetes has it. And that's how it goes. Yeah. And then sometimes, once I figured this out like 2.5 years ago, I see that in everybody, but sometimes somebody comes in and they look bright, they look healthy, they have a demeanor that's very calm, and they complain about a symptom. And I question them, and I do like a biofeedback testing procedure, and I don't find it. I don't find lactic acidosis. Okay. But, and one of the main symptoms is actually anxiety, or a tightening or a narrowing somewhere in their body where there's this sort of like a maybe cramping or fibromyalgia, mm-hmm. or the tightening, narrowing could be mental, like they feel like they're closed in, they mm-hmm. want to escape a room, they got social anxiety, whatever. Mm-hmm. And there's a serious, muscle cramping, like, there's a number of symptoms that very much indicate it. And I'll ask somebody, do you get anxiety? And most people say, yes, they'll at least have a little bit of it. Mm-hmm. But the people that don't have lactic acidosis, I ask them the question, do you get anxious anxiety? And they say no. And there's no emotion behind their answer. It's a flat out no, and it's very calm. Whereas other people, they'll say, well, and then the answer is yes. If somebody has to think about whether or not they have anxiety, then there's some lactic acidosis going on there.
And so like it could be symptoms in general, but it could also be that they already have been diagnosed with a disease such as you mentioned heart disease or even cancer. But can you talk about some symptoms that are mild, like the anxiety, or some underlying conditions that people just think might be a normal process of life, but yet could be lactic acidosis?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how you want me to answer that question.
Just some basic symptoms that you see a lot of in your practice that maybe a lot of people watching this might go, wow, maybe I do have some stagnation with my blood that I need to look into, because I think it's more common than we have been taught to believe. And this is something that we haven't really learned much about is the lactic acidosis of the blood.
Right. So it comes down to 3 different areas of the body. So first being the stomach. So any kind of stomach scenario, whether it's nausea or lack of appetite. And then the other area is up here.
Mm-hmm.
So people get a tightening up here in their pecs, near their sternum. It could be the heart for men. It could be fibromyalgia for women.
Mm-hmm.
Or people say, oh, they got the one spot that, is by their shoulder blade and it's always there. And they get a massage therapist to work it out, but it always comes back.
Right.
And then the third area is up here. So negative thoughts, fear, uncertainty, doubt, questioning one's life's choices. Did I take the right career, that kind of stuff. So and I ask people, so do you get anxiety? And they'll say, yeah. And I say, well, where do you have it in your body? Is it here, here, or here? And just last week, I had somebody say it's from head to toe. And she's been avoiding red meat, for years and years. She drinks 2 diet pops every day. And, she's got a carbohydrate-based diet. So all of her muscles are tight. So that's just an example.
Yeah, almost like you mentioned, like the fibromyalgia, but also like I see in my practice an epidemic of low stomach acid. And so could that also be correlated with lactic acidosis?
Yeah, because one of the main solutions to fix lactic acidosis is supplying all the B vitamins. And the stomach needs B vitamins to make hydrochloric acid. So if you're deficient in B vitamins, you get all the symptoms that I just talked about, plus low stomach acid. And that's what I originally had black mold poisoning 2.5 years ago. That's how I came upon this information. And one of my symptoms was lack of appetite and nausea. And I actually had to stop eating red meat for 6 months. It's my favorite food. I couldn't have it for 6 months because it would hurt my stomach. So once I figured out the black mold, I started detoxing it and, fixing the scenario.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that was another reason I appreciated finding you and reading your story and stuff, because I too went through a toxic mold exposure last year and was able to heal myself over time by, essentially what I didn't know I was doing was cleaning my blood, basically. I just didn't call it that. It was like this protocol and that protocol. But things that you mentioned in some of your lectures are like ketosis. And you've even talked about the carnivore diet, which is what I had put myself through in order to kind of be on an antifungal approach, if you will, to stop feeding the mold that I was exposed to. So talk about, like, when you do come across people like that, what's some of the first things that they could do to start to heal from lactic acidosis, and maybe touch on the mold a little bit. I think more and more people are discovering that they are sensitive to mold poisonings.
Right. Yeah. 70% of buildings in the United States have enough black mold to negatively affect the people in the building. So
Wow.
most, and so, but they'll have symptoms and they go to a doctor and they're diagnosed with asthma. And they take an inhaler, and medical doctors across the country ignore lactic acid, or they ignore both mold and lactic acidosis. But so what do I do with these patients? Well, we're always addressing the diet. So in order to fix lactic acidosis, you have to supply B vitamins, and I have some supplements for that. And then I have people eat liver. If they don't like to eat liver, I have supplements with liver in them. And then you got to stop the production of lactate, which is from carbohydrates, excessive amounts of carbohydrates. So that's where ketosis comes in. And what's great about the carnivore diet is that, for so long, most of the holistic doctors, including myself, were telling people to eat low carb, but that's not enough. And then you got to raise the fat up. But then the other thing is you have to increase satiety with the meal. So that's where the red meat protein comes in to make people feel satisfied for so long. So it's been a great learning experience, and as I get on Twitter and watch, read doctors on Twitter, how they talk about the carnivore diet, it really has changed my focus on the diet. So, and then the other part about lactic acidosis then is to clean the blood. So now when people do some sort of blood cleansing protocol, it's typically labeled as a liver cleanse or a gallbladder cleanse or fungus cleanse or whatever. But the truth is, at some point, they're getting somewhere to the blood somehow. But to get more direct, I use binders, which would be I call them special dirt. So various carbon chains in pill form that I have people take to clean the body out.
And so do you have certain products that you carry, or is there just things like, activated charcoal or things like that that you just recommend certain people?
Yeah, in my office, I carry about 700 or 800 different products.
Wow.
But I have a core number of products that I love because the results are so good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it comes down to what does that individual need? And then you can divide those supplements into categories. So you got the detoxifying category, you got the organ support, nourishing organs category. And then you have the supplements to fix lactic acidosis.
And do you feel like lactic acidosis is kind of the means to all disease, basically? Like it's kind of the underlying condition that's behind a lot of disease?
It's behind all the disease, but there's always the cause. So
Yeah.
the lactic acidosis is the mechanism,
Okay.
but the cause is heavy metal toxicity, chemicals, pathogens, and excess sugar metabolism, and then all the bad oils, the bad fats. So, and this is the kicker. So from 1920 to 1960, they didn't talk about detoxification, and they didn't have the bad fats, and they didn't have the excess sugars like we do now. So they weren't thinking in terms of cause.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now there was the Great Depression, and there was a lot of white bread that poor people were given. And so you had 10-year-old kids with heart disease because they ate so much white bread and nothing else. But even in the 1950s, they still weren't talking about cause. It wasn't until the 1980s when Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt discovered mercury
Mm-hmm.
in the human body, so we can combine fixing the cause with modern knowledge and then fixing the mechanism with the old knowledge. You put them together, and that's how you get really good results now.
And probably a lot of what we're seeing today is due to overexposure to sugar and refined carbohydrates.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah. And
Right.
what
And
about like toxic chemicals or toxic exposure, like you mentioned, the mold or just chemical exposures and things?
yeah, those are all problems. And then the bad seed oils, formerly known as vegetable oils,
Mm-hmm.
very toxic. So it's a matter of cleaning up the environment, cleaning up the diet, make sure that you can have a really good quality diet, but you're still sick, because a good quality diet doesn't kill mold.
Right.
You gotta prevent the feeding of mold and viruses and bacteria and parasites with a good diet. And then you got to rely on supplements to actually kill and clean the pathogens and clean out the toxins.
And you've talked about how the lactic acidosis can be related to cancer. With regard to that, tell me like how you would approach kind of a protocol with someone that's, came to you, they're tired of conventional medicine, they're looking for answers, and maybe you have a way of helping to have you been successful with like remediating cancer from someone?
I have been with ketosis, and then supplying supplements to help with lactic acidosis as best as possible.
That's
One thing that's
fantastic.
missing, and Dr. Thomas Seyfried talks about this, he's a cancer researcher. One thing that's missing is inhibiting glutamine. So cancer cells feed off of glutamine and sugar, glucose. So I'm trying to partner up with there's a DO in near my office. I'm going to talk to him about glutamine inhibitor drugs that he can prescribe to have a better success with cancer.
Yeah. And when you were talking earlier about how anxiety, people feel it here, and then maybe they've got I've heard you even say social anxiety thoughts or even violent thoughts with lactic
Right.
acidosis.
Right.
It's interesting that these two areas are where our mitochondria is the richest. How does the mitochondria play into this lactic acidosis?
Well, if somebody's got lactic acidosis, their mitochondria are not being used very well.
Okay.
And the lactate is being used as fuel in the cytoplasm outside of the mitochondria.
Okay.
And even though the cells have oxygen and they should be able to kick back into glycolysis, which is sugar burning,
Right.
and then the mitochondria can be used for fat burning, lactic acidosis is the continual use of lactate as a fuel. So people can use alcohol as a fuel,
Mm-hmm.
or fat or ketones. There's all these different fuels.
Mm-hmm.
So when the body's using lactate and won't stop, that's the disease. That's cachexia,
Yes.
which is, you know, how people die. You lose weight, you can't gain muscle back. It's a downward spiral, and there's a point of no return, which is very unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a researcher I talked to. He's trying to specialize in cachexia with some medications and stuff. But, you know, if you got a 30-year-old just diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, or a 60-year-old just diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, like, that's not that hard, you know, to reverse.
Mm-hmm.
But once they've had it for 40 years, and now they had a heart attack last year, and now they have a cancer showing up, you know, it's like you got to work fast and work hard right now.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully you're not at that point of no return.
Yeah. So like even something like diabetes could be lactic acidosis, or is, you know,
It is.
Yeah.
Diabetes is lactic acidosis.
Mm-hmm.
Cancer is lactic acidosis.
Yes. And
Yeah.
things like brain fog, even small symptoms, like you're mentioning anxiety, where people are like, well, I'm relatively healthy, but I have a little bit of anxiety, or I have brain fog every day, or I have trouble focusing and stuff like that. Do you feel like even these small underlying symptoms are like the pre-state of like, it's becoming really bad, we need to address it now?
Yeah. Like, I think 95% of psychiatry is lactic acidosis.
Okay.
The addiction to drugs, medications, cigarettes, alcohol is lactic acidosis.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
so interesting. And what about like your opinion on, I think I've heard you touch on a little bit of circadian rhythm with regard to lactic acidosis. And how do you feel about being in the sunshine for people, like putting that as part of their protocol of like getting adequate sun and kind of resetting their circadian rhythm?
Yeah, it's more about using electrons. So the
Okay.
sun imparts electrons into your skin,
Mm-hmm.
and also there's water. There's a break of the H2O, and half that oxygen goes into the mitochondria. So, I mean, electrons are needed for all that.
Right.
So it's like, just think of the sun as part of it's like a battery,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's charging electrons into your body, which is
Yeah.
part of, so the point is to get your mitochondria to use fat as fuel. That's the whole point. That's ketosis.
All right.
So if your mitochondria are using fat as fuel, that eliminates the glucose, the alcohol, the lactate, all those other fuels go away.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're getting all these fantastic benefits. And the word that I want to use is catabolism. So your body starts eating away the bad stuff, the fibroids, the cysts, the cancer cells, the fat cells get smaller, skin tags, all those things go away because your body's eating that stuff up. Whereas when you're using sugar as fuel, that's anabolic, that's building up, right? You get fatter, you get skin tags, you get fibroids and cysts. So sugar is anabolic, and then the burning ketones is catabolic, and that's what you want to do. Now, what's interesting too about ketones though is that in ketosis is you spare your muscle tissue.
Mm,
You know,
okay.
you keep your muscles as is so that you can go hunting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the ketosis is kind of like what you want to focus on first, and then getting that sunshine in, or kind of resetting the circadian rhythm to help the mitochondria at that point, because then the mitochondria are functioning more optimally.
Right. That's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Oh, that's so wonderful. So it's kind of a stair-step approach of just different protocols along the way. So I'm really glad we're discussing this, because there are options for people that may have heard that they have some diagnosis and there's no cure for it, or you know, they've been to every single doctor in the tri-state area and no one is helping them. So it could be something as easy as cleaning the blood, but yet it's not so easy. It's just there are steps to take anyway. So
Right. Yeah, we know the destruction of the cells. We just have to reverse engineer it.
mm-hmm.
Right.
So through your toxic mold exposure, what in your opinion is an optimal approach to healing mold? I mean, I know it starts with healing the lactic acidosis, but what else do you recommend for someone who's had exposure to toxic mold?
Well, mold is three things. So let's say you have mold on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
It's releasing spores in the air. The spores have mycotoxins sitting on the spore. You breathe it in or you swallow it. Now it's in your lungs, or it's in your stomach, or in your intestines.
Mm-hmm.
Or it can settle on your skin.
Mm.
You get skin sensitivities and rashes. You got to address all. And then the mycotoxins in your body kill the tissue, and then the spores grow on dead tissue. So
Wow.
you got three things you got to take care of: the mold, the spores, and the mycotoxins.
Mm-hmm.
So killing the mold is actually one of the easier things to do. You know, knowing that the diet is good, you're not feeding the mold with sugar, and fermented foods could be bad sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
dairy products. So you kill the mold with, you know, really good oregano or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got to drain out the dead mold and detoxify the spores and the mycotoxins.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the binders come in.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the other aspect is that most people have some sort of heavy metal or chemical toxicity,
Mm-hmm.
which also kills the tissue,
Right.
which also supplies fertile ground for the mold to grow on.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some people I just detoxify, they're not moldy. Other people I just kill the mold and they're not very toxic. But a lot of people are both toxic with metals and chemicals, and they have a lot of mold. So we'll kill a bunch of mold and then detoxify and then drain out the dead mold. And we're kind of going back and forth. It's like a gas pedal and the brake pedal, and we're switching back and forth, you know, dealing with mold and dealing with toxicity. And it, you know, and it takes months or years to do this. So, and you know, I figured out the mold October of 2016 in my heart. I moved out of that office 4 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm planning on 2 years of detoxification. And I
Mm.
already have the lab work to prove out of 4 mycotoxins, 3 of them are now normal in my body. So I
Mm.
have 1 more to go, and, you know, whatever. So I'm just, you know, planning on 2 years of detoxifying and repairing from this.
Yeah, mine took about a year and a half because I was in the toxic mold environment unknowingly, May of 2017, and I really didn't see like almost 90% recovery until about 4 months ago when I was almost done being carnivore and I'd kind of gone through all my protocols and everything. So I mean, it's really nice that you brought that up, because I think people just think I just have to get out of the environment, or I just have to clean it and then I'll be cured of it.
Yeah,
And
that's
unfortunately, that's not it's a much more step-by-step process that requires, you can't get well in the same environment you got sick in. So get out of that first or clean it, but then also you have to take these steps to get the spores, like you said, out of your system.
right.
Yeah, that's really great. And so this is encouraging that people maybe can reach out to you, and we'll talk about that in just a minute of how they can get some answers finally to get past these things.
Yeah.
So also you had mentioned in one of your videos that I really liked about the importance of vitamin C. And I was interested in your thoughts as to how vitamin C should be viewed as maybe a plethora of vitamins and not just ascorbic acid. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that was something, the guy that discovered vitamin C, Albert Zent Georgi, I always mispronounce his name,
I know
but
it is a hard name.
yeah, even he figured out, well, ascorbic acid isn't enough. There's, rutin and paprika and other foods that have a complex of vitamins,
Mm-hmm.
of chemicals that make up the vitamin C complex.
Okay.
So if you have 100 people all lined up and they all have a vitamin C deficiency, and you give them all ascorbic acid, like, that's not good enough.
Right.
And there'll be a different series of symptoms based on the complexity of their biochemical deficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because the
So,
vitamins were given like the alphabet, like they were given, here's vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's only C, right? It's just that was the name given to it. And so as far as like the certain properties that carry that, it could be that they also include other things like you mentioned.
right. It's just the fallacy of reductionism. You think you're going to find that one thing that'll save the world or save your life, whereas in Mother Nature, it's not one thing. It's a complexity of things combined, working together.
Exactly. I always call it an orchestra, and every other player in the orchestra needs the other players, or you only have one sound. You need the multiple sounds to make beautiful music. So,
right.
Yeah. So as far as vitamin C, with the importance of, if there are carnivores watching, because I know a lot of people that are carnivores like to follow my videos and review kind of, should I keep moving forward with carnivory? Should I, add new foods in? But with the carnivore approach, you get so many vitamins and minerals from just meat, except for only trace amounts of vitamin C. Do you think that could be detrimental in the long run? Should they be adding in, you know, small amounts of like lime juice or some sort of paprika to get that well-rounded vitamin C that might be lacking?
Well, to answer that question, the first part of that question, when you're eating carbohydrates, what happens is, you know, it's broken down into sugar in your body. Sugar and vitamin C enter the cell in the same channel.
Okay.
And sugar always wins.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, you have a vitamin C deficiency when you eat too many carbohydrates.
Okay.
But when you're eating carnivore only, and there's no carbs whatsoever, there's no competition between sugar and vitamin C. So vitamin C is easily transferable, you know, into the cells. Okay. Having said that, I still think our ancestors were mostly omnivores, right? Although possibly 80% of their diet was fat, or 80% of their calories were from fat, maybe, depending on the season. And there were times in the year when people ate plants. Mm-hmm. And I consider myself lucky to be able to eat plants, as should everyone else, because there are a few people, like I'm sure you know Michaela Peterson, and there's a guy on YouTube in New Jersey, carnivore for 6 years, Frank Tufano. Mm-hmm. He eats a plant and he breaks out in cystic acne. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's unfortunate, and so therefore he's eating carnivore and doing fine. And so, but you know, if you're able to eat salads and, you know, season your food with herbs, go for it. You're just supplying more nutrients. Now, there is the argument against plants because of anti-nutrients. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you have a oyster, which has, let's say, 85 grams of zinc or milligrams of zinc in it, and you have kale with it, now you just blocked 90% of the zinc. You know, so that's a factor. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing with plants. You got pluses and negatives. Mm-hmm. With plants. They have poisonous chemicals to fight you. But yet at the same time, we evolved with plants for however long we evolved with them. So we become dependent on their secondary metabolites. You know, like the chemicals that make aromas, the chemicals that produce, you know, various chemical reactions in our body. We evolved with plants. Mm-hmm. Okay, but it comes down to, you know, everybody's different. So what can your body handle?
That's good. I like your bioindividual approach, because that's what I recommend too, is to see if you can do them, but you don't have to if they don't work for you. You know,
right, exactly. Right.
That's something you can't live without, but yet if you can do them, it can be a good thing, especially seasonal approach. I'm all about like really focusing on only the ones that are in season and only in your area, what you can get a hold of, not kind of, you know, having oranges when you live in Canada in the dead of winter. You know, it's just not kind of right for that latitudinal line. It's not right for that time of year. Right. And I know I've heard you talk about like a ketogenic kind of cycling, because you do allow for like this cycling, it seems like, of like being ketosis, but then you can have a little bit of carbs here and there. Is that correct? Did I gather that from one of your videos? Right.
Cycling ketosis. Mm-hmm. I think the native state of our body, you know, for our ancestors was a mild state of ketosis.
Right.
And if they didn't eat any food because there wasn't any food, then they were deeper in ketosis. Mm-hmm. And then came June and there were these plants. So they would eat plants and come out of ketosis. Or later in the summer, there were some fruits, not very sweet, probably mostly sour. Mm-hmm. And there was a little bit, you know, but anyways, they would come out of ketosis. But also, you know, I don't want to discard, there are people that can't eat meat. Mm-hmm. You know, like I have 21 staff here, and there's one of them, she said she decided one day to not eat meat. Well, she didn't eat it for a week and she felt a lot better. Mm-hmm. And then when she eats meat, she feels bad. Mm-hmm. So maybe she got some gallbladder dysfunction, maybe some stomach dysfunction. You know, maybe that's fixable, but there's other people that that's just the way their body's made up. That's and right. So, you know, so I think that true carnivory is applicable to a greater percentage of the population, whereas true veganism is applicable really to a smaller percentage of the population. I think that carnivory is like more suitable for the human species.
Yes, I agree. And there are times, you know, that these are more therapeutic approaches, like maybe she's going away from animal foods because her gallbladder is bothering her and her liver's bothering her. And in order to calm down the body, maybe her body's just inherently telling her, I just can't handle a lot of things that are very hard to digest right now.
Right. Just like I had to avoid red meat for 6 months because I had black mold.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So there's, changes. It's like a garden. The body's like a garden. So, you got to take care of it and pull the weeds and add fertilizer and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think all of that is so key that you use that bioindividuality with each person. So, and we mentioned that we might talk about some of your favorite books of these old world nutrition and natural medicine doctors that you have followed and read about over the years. So maybe let's talk about some of those so people can get this information that you've researched as well.
Well, I can give you a website that contains some of my favorite books.
Okay.
So the website is ifnh.org.
IFNH, and I'll put that in the links below. .org.
Yeah, it stands for International Foundation for Nutrition and Health.
Oh, very good.
And they own the copyright of Dr. Roy Lee's work.
Okay.
So they're actually separated from the company that makes his products.
Mm-hmm.
Foundation is a different entity. And they also have a training class so people can become like a whole food practitioner.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Very cool. And you have a couple different ventures that you're dealing with right now, as far as like actually a nice healthy bar that you've put together, and also a kind of a supplement line. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, the bar is at goodfat.bar. That's the website. And we have 6 products, and they are bars that are circular, and the base is cacao butter. And the first 3 that we made are, I don't know if you're familiar with the ratio of fat versus protein plus carbs for ketosis, right?
Yes.
So if you had a 2-to-1 ratio of fat versus protein plus carbs, chances are very, very high you'll be in ketosis.
Mm-hmm.
So those first 3 bars are at about like a 1-to-1 ratio.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next 3 bars are very ketogenic, like 5-to-1, 4-to-1, like that. And they taste great. So the point is to take cacao butter and make it taste good and put it into a package so you're not, carrying around bottles of oil with you in your car or butter.
Yeah.
So the other venture is the Heritage Glandulars. It's a supplement company I started with a friend. We have one product. It's called the Multi-Glandular. Nice. So it's got 9 glands in it. And what we're trying to do is mimic the diet of our ancestors. So they would kill a mastodon or a gazelle or whatever, and they'd eat mostly meat, but then they'd also get the pituitary, adrenals, thyroid, and eat the glands.
Yeah.
And so we have the 9 glands. We don't have thyroid in there, and that's on purpose because there's a lot of people who they'll get easily revved up by adding a thyroid gland into their pill. Right. So, but the point of this though is to have some glands sometimes. Mm-hmm. For example, like if you weigh 160 or more, you take 4 pills a day for a month, and then you stop it for 2 months, and then you do 4 pills a day so 1 bottle every season. Yeah. Now if somebody weighs about 120, they do 2 pills a day for a month. Now you're just doing two bottles for the whole year. Okay, so cycle it like that.
That's so smart that you're addressing the size of the individual too, because so many of these supplement companies out there just say, take 4 each day. Well, that's a big difference if you're 90 pounds versus 200 pounds, So I think that's really key that you've honed in on that. I'm excited to share your products with people. I think glandulars are underestimated because they can be very powerful in just stimulating the functioning of our own glands. So I think
right. So let me add this. So you said you work with biotics, right? And then there's also standard. I mean, a lot of nutritional supplement companies, they have glandulars, but the glandulars don't have any hormones in them, which is great, which is actually very therapeutic because you can have it every single day for years, and you're getting all those constituents of the cells. So, but when I made the multi-glandular, it's just dried glands containing everything, including the hormones. And that's why you can't have it every day for 6 months. Okay. Your body gets used to that. But yet at the same time, it's very healing and very energizing, just like our ancestors would eat the glands of the animals, and it was super healing, right? We don't want to like subtract out the natural diet that our DNA evolved on.
That's so fascinating. So like, even would your glandular have something like the testes or the ovaries or something like that in it for someone who had like low testosterone or low progesterone, or anybody dealing with like hormonal variances?
Not yet. Our future products will have testicular tissue and ovary and like that.
So you've got
Uterine.
more specific glandulars coming, but this is just the multi one that kind of covers all the main glands.
Right. So the point of this company is to recreate Dr. Henry Harrower's product line. So he sold his company in 1940 to a pharmaceutical company, which later was bought out by Pfizer. So when I learned this, I thought, oh man, we're missing the foundations of endocrinology. We're missing Dr. Henry Harrower's line of products. But then I found a book with his ingredients and all that. So I have everything that he had. So I'm just trying to recreate it. Now, this first product was not his product. It was another doctor from the 80s. We're trying to go for like, what's going to be our first flagship product? So we're doing this multi-glandular. Now, Dr. Henry Harrower didn't have any product that had nine parts in it, 9 glands. Most of his products had like 2 or 4, and then they were arranged very specifically, but we'll get to those.
That's exciting. Well, I can't wait to help promote those as I work with my clients, because I really do believe in the power of glandulars. So I'm excited to look into that. Yeah, well, I appreciate your time so much, because there is an underestimated value of blood and the sacredness of blood. I mean, even the Bible itself talks about how blood is so sacred. And I think that you've really, been able to share and talk about the way we should be focusing more on taking care of our blood and cleaning our blood, and always making sure that we're setting up the stages in our body for proper circulation and proper blood flow. So I just really appreciate the work that you're doing. I hope it continues, and I'll be following you along the way as it does. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So if people want more information about how they can get a hold of you or maybe even work with you, how would they do that?
They would go to our website. The email would be info@HCAA.com, which stands for the Nutritional Healing Center Ann Arbor.
Okay. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes so that way they can get a hold of you, and they can find more info at the website as well.
Right.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Schmidt. I so appreciate your time today, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
You're welcome, Jodelle. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye for now.
Okay, bye.